Welcome, everybody. My name is Karen McMullen. I'm a features programmer at Doc NYC. We're here today talking with filmmakers Sam Osborn and Nick Capezzera, who shared their wonderful film universe with us. How you doing, guys?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
thanks. I really loved your film. It was so moving, so beautiful. So you guys worked together on a documentary series at Lincoln Center called Recollect, yeah, on jazz musicians. Is that where you became aware of Ronnie?
Yeah, I think that's definitely where Nick and I worked together for the first time. I think that must have been where we first became aware of Ronnie, but we kind of found his story in a different way. Nick, do you want to tell her that?
Yeah, well,
He's better at this one.
well, yeah, we became aware of Wallace around the time that Sam and I started working together, and I'll try to do a shortened version of it. But basically, it was a gig that Sam couldn't take, and he said, "Can you do it, Nick?" And another musician at the gig that I filmed said, "Well, I know this guy Wallace, and maybe I can introduce you to him if you come film this gig up in Harlem." So I went. That's when we started, researching Wallace and discovering what a, powerhouse and what a influential musician he was or is in the jazz world. And the rest is history. We met him just a couple months later, and Sam and I went up to see him in Jersey just not too long after that.
Mm-hmm. So the piece was moving on, so many levels, emotionally, visually, music, of course. And talk about what made you decide to shoot it in black and white.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were really inspired by the photography of William Claxton, who's done so many of the jazz covers of with Blue Note, and just in general jazz photography from the 50s and 60s and kind of onward. And we wanted to make the film the entirety of it look like one of his photos. And on the other hand, we also wanted to find a way to kind of visualize the way Wallace, I think, led his life and perceived himself in the jazz world, which is, he always wore a suit everywhere. If he didn't wear a suit, he kind of wore this big, kind of very luxurious varsity jacket that he had forever. And he kind of held himself and in the world as sort of one of those 1950s jazz greats would. He, like the way we think of Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis and Coltrane, those guys, and his surroundings didn't always match that persona that he put forth. And so we kind of figured, how can we shoot his life so that he is really kind of portrayed in that light as much as possible. And black and white was sort of part of that, and using kind of all static compositions, really trying to avoid handheld, making sure that we were really kind of taking Claxton's photographic style through into a documentary setting.
Yeah, well, it worked really well. It's interesting that you're talking about how he holds himself. He comes off, the intimacy you guys developed with him was really nice. He comes off as kind of a gentle giant, this kind of affable character, but yet when it comes to music, he is extremely, very exacting. He's a complete perfectionist. What was it like filming with him?
I mean, it was I think it took a while for him to really get used to us. To just sort of, I don't want to say we earned his trust. It was more he just took a while to be comfortable and opening up with us. And what happened is, kind of when he opened up with us, he also sort of opened up his how quickly he could turn and be really short with you and really impatient with you and kind of annoyed that you're asking him to do something. And that was good. I mean, I think when he started getting annoyed with us is when we knew that he was opening up to us a little bit. And so, it wasn't anything where he would have blow-ups or tantrums or anything with this. It was more just that he would get annoyed if we asked him to take off his sunglasses in an interview, it would really throw him off, or things like that. And it is sort of similar to the way he was exacting with his music. He's exacting with his image in ways that I don't think I expected, and exacting in the way he wanted to talk about people and music and jazz in general. He really didn't want to put people down. He didn't want to, he's had a rough go of it in the industry, his entire life, but he never really wanted to, drag people who may have wronged him in the past. I mean, there's so many times we tried him to tell stories about certain people or certain situations. He's just like, it's not worth it for me to do that. So as exacting as he was, and as much of a temper as he had about music, he also was really kind of caring about the industry as a whole and his place in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk a bit about the industry, because people are fond of saying, that jazz is dead. But, yet every year we have lots of documentaries at Doc NYC about jazz, and they sell out, and jazz obviously isn't, completely a dead art. Can you talk about the state of the art as you see it these days?
I think Adam Schatz says it really well in the movie, in that there's so much great jazz being made today, and jazz is being forwarded by a lot of great young musicians today. But it's also moved into the world of the institutions and the academic world, and places like Jazz Lincoln Center, which, I think it could be argued do as much good as they do as much, I don't want to say harm, but hold back the genre as well, because of, really touting traditionalism as a foundational part of the art form. So I think it's just that there's so much great art being made today. The market is, it's there for a very select number of musicians, and for the rest of them, it's a matter of, you have to, like Wallace, you have to be touring, you have to be playing live, you have to constantly putting out music, and it's sort of it's a struggle to put together rent each month, I think, for most jazz musicians. But that's definitely not to say that, the art isn't lively and always moving forward.
And given the fact that the state of music distribution these days with Spotify and iTunes, are musicians even making albums?
Yeah, I know Wallace put out a number of records over the last 10 years. And yeah, I try to keep up with the jazz world as much as I can. And even though I'm kind of definitely lag behind like a true fan, I still listen to probably 7 to 10 new jazz records a year from new musicians. So yeah, I think jazz musicians probably honestly put out more records than most musicians of other genres. And I think that's actually been true for the whole history of jazz. Jazz musicians back in the 40s and 50s put out tons of records. They would always be in the studio, and there's a lot of examples of like a studio session amounting to like 4 or 5 records. I'm not sure if that happens as much anymore, but it's always been a genre where there's been just kind of almost more albums than you can keep up with. And I think that's still maybe not as much the case, but still, there's still a lot of albums out there. Yeah.
Nick, were you a jazz affectionato before you came to this piece?
I was not so much as Sam. I did learn a lot about the history, and as we tried to pin down Wallace, a bunch of the eras that Miles Davis, graced with his music. But I was into the classics like Coltrane and Miles and Django, and, probably, found my love for jazz, I'd say at around, 17 or 18, because, so many of the musicians I liked were also influenced by those guys. So I think that, my love for jazz and the art form goes back pretty far. I'm in my mid-30s now and got into it when I was a teenager. So, but, over the course of this documentary, I've found a new love for artists that Wallace would mention, or someone else that was in, his orbit would mention, people that you you'd never even heard of before, but they revered them, so highly that you would, you'd almost have to go and dig. And, there's just such nuances with, trumpet players or pianists or vocalists. And, Wallace had an opinion about pretty much all of them. So every time he'd mention someone, I'd, we really got into Freddie Hubbard because he was a contemporary and played with Freddie. And, Miles had a relationship with Freddie. And, there were definitely some moments that, my eyes were opened again, and my ears for musicians that I had never heard of before.
That was some of the best parts of filming with Wallace over the years. Is you'd like, you find a new artist and you're like, hey Wallace, what do you think about this guy? Man, I hate that guy. Or like a certain era of records, and he'd like hate one, but then he like, hey, but he got back to it there, and he'd like walk you through your appreciation of artists in a really interesting way, because he learned it academically, but he really like forever listened to it, and he would go back and listen, re-listen. So it's fun to just bounce. You discover something, like you bounce it off them, and you really get like a concrete opinion immediately.
Well, I'm not a jazz fan at all, and absolutely not at all. And I really loved the film. The story that you guys created was incredibly moving. I actually knocked over my coffee at the end when the card came up that he passed away. It really choked me up. But I think it's one of the interesting things is that in the film, Wallace said that Davis was the only one who saw him, like recognized his talent. But that's not quite true, because Wayne Shorter, recognized him as the only one worthy of being able to carry this torch forward. And in fact, Wayne Shorter had written another piece, right? Legend. There's a second composition. What has happened with that? Where is that piece now?
So all of those, so the main, we call them the universe compositions, and there are four pieces that Wayne Shorter wrote. He wrote most of them in the late 60s, and then he wrote Twin Dragons, I believe, in the 80s. And they were all written originally for Miles Davis and then passed along to Wallace kind of at the 2005 time. And that's sort of what the film follows, is the recording of them, and they're still they exist. I mean, the album that Wallace recorded of them is finished, and it's sort of trying to find a home, kind of like our film, and is on its way to being released. And so that's where it is. And you're right that Wayne he wrote Legend about Miles Davis, but it makes a lot of sense that he passed it on to Wallace to record, kind of as the only person who can record that sort of musical story of Miles.
Mm-hmm. So while researching, a bit, your film, like your conversations with Ronnie, your film made me go look up some stuff. And one of the things was talking about the piece Universe as a missing link, linking two eras of jazz, of linking Davis to Ronnie, and linking the past to the present. Can you talk? I thought that was a really interesting theme. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, Nick, chime in whenever, because I think this is definitely something we both thought about. I mean, I think, so the music is, we've always thought about the record as one of the missing links in Miles Davis's, arc. It's one of those things that I think we didn't get to see from Miles Davis during his career, and this kind of fills in that. But on the other hand, I think it's Wallace it's a missing link in his own career of sort of what happens with his career after Miles Davis passes away, and is he able to close the loop on his mentorship with Miles, and I don't want to say step out of his shadow, I mean, but sort of honor him while also truly being recognized as just himself. I mean, that was something he struggled with his whole career, is being recognized outside of the echo of Miles Davis's name. It's kind of hard to say Wallace Roney without hearing Miles Davis come before or after it, pretty closely. And so I think it's always been, and Universe in some ways is that link. It's where it's, you know, where you can maybe just let Miles Davis go and let Wallace Roney begin. And so yeah, I think it's both for in Miles Davis's kind of musical history, and then in just Wallace's, you know, story as a musician.
Well, yeah, I can add to that. Well, you know, something that was a question Sam asked everyone that we interviewed. You know, where does this piece of music fit? And it always elicited a reaction from everyone we interviewed. And you know, so much of the way Wallace lived his life as a musician was, you know, going back to jazz as an art form, and you know, just pushing it ahead, pushing it into the future. And you know, I feel like the mentorship that that Wallace received from Miles was, you know, encapsulated in the film as something that's always moving forward. And yeah, I don't kind of lost my track on that one, but.
Well, no, I think you're right. It's like, if mentorship doesn't stop when you stop discussing Miles. I mean, I think or when you stop being mentored by Miles. I think Wallace kind of always kind of held that mentorship or that teaching in his head when he practiced every day. I mean, so I think he kind of mentioned that he was always thinking through, you know, what he learned. But I think all of that, all of the missing link stuff, we wanted to get that idea across without, you know, requiring people to have like a prerequisite knowledge of Miles's music or prerequisite knowledge of jazz. I mean, I think it was really important for us to just, if you didn't know a single jazz song or jazz musician, that you could understand Wallace's, you know, his path and the struggles he had.
Yeah, that would be me.
Yeah, I mean, that's great to hear.
Well done. Did Wallace get a chance to see the film?
Didn't. No, that was kind of one of the hardest things about the timing and the way he passed. We had just finished the movie. You know, we'd gotten really close to finishing it in March, and we're sort of trying to figure out what was the next steps and when to show him, because he could be a tough critic. I think he watched our preview, he watched the trailer we cut, and we got some phone calls for just there's one shot in that trailer that he had some real problems with, and you know, so we were nervous about showing it to him, and now of course we feel totally, you know, it's definitely the thing I think weighing on us most about his passing, is that he wasn't able to see this thing that we made. Yeah, I don't want to say we made it for him, but it was really for him in a lot of ways, and he just didn't get a chance to see more than, you know, the 2-minute trailer.
Seems like just as he had Davis in his ear, you had him in your ear a little bit as you made the film, and you did a really, really lovely job. I hope this film is seen very widely. And with that, you know, we'll bring this Q&A to a close. It was really great talking to you guys. Thank you again for sharing Universe with us, and good luck going forward.
Thank you. Thanks for having the film in the festival.
You're welcome.